If you really want to take your game up, and I don't care if we're talking hunting or management, you want to take it up a significant level, you learn as much as you possibly can about your prey. When we do that, we can use our most powerful weapon, which is not our compounds, it's not our primitive weapon muzzleloader that shoots a group at 250 yards like that. It's this right here. We have the power of analytical thought. And once we understand our prey, we can go ahead and put ourselves consistently in a better position to succeed. And that's what we're talking about today on Growing Big Television. We talk a ton about creating high odds, low impact setups. To be most effective, you have to match your improvements to the habitat. Western habitat, heck of a lot different than Midwestern habitat. He's not putting all that energy into building up his antlers until his body's taken care of. The overwhelming majority of the tips that I come up with are issues I'm running into while I'm out here working. You hear it every year when you're talking to other hunters. Man, I was sitting out on my stand and this buck came out of nowhere. I've never seen him before. He's huge, and there he is. And man, I either just missed or I got him. Where the heck did he come from? Well, to really understand where these bucks are coming from, we need to understand home ranges. Okay, the home range for a buck is on average about 640 acres. Now keep in mind we're talking 100% tendencies here. There's going to be exceptions to everything. But telemetry studies have shown over and over that a home range for a mature buck is right around 640 acres. Now, that 640 acres is not what we think of as that square outlined by 4 roads. Now, the next thing we need to understand is bucks do not spend equal amounts of time in their entire home range. All a buck's home range is the area that he is familiar with, that he goes to at times. Now, a daylight core area is different. A daylight core area, a buck has one home range. That's it. Flip side, when it comes to daylight core area bedding areas, they tend to have multiple daylight core areas. All right, so now let's circle all the way back to that buck that showed up out of nowhere. He must have been rutting and he must have, took off and blah, blah. Probably not. That does happen every now and then. Quite honestly, I think that what happens when a buck abandons their home range is more often than not it has to do with does. They find an estrus doe, they're trailing her. Oh, she crosses over outside of his home range. He's not going to stop. He's on the trail of something he wants. So he continues. And let's say he either finds her, breeds her, or he gets drove off. Okay, this is the peak of the rut, so now he starts heading back home. Oh, he just picked up another estrus doe trail, and that leads him even further away, and it kind of creates a domino effect. That does happen, but more often than not, when these bucks are showing up out of nowhere, that your hunting ground was part of their home range all along. It just so happens that he's spending a disproportionate area over here, over there, and over there, not on your ground. One of the ways that can help us is when it comes to late summer. It's not a bad idea to go out and do some driving and looking at some fields. Checking those food sources, looking at those farm fields, looking at those clear-cut regens, observing those within, let's say, 2, 3, even 4 miles your hunting property is not a bad idea, because that will help let you know that, that big guy over there, he just may come over to see me. Maybe I want to alter my standards for this year one way or another because of it. Maybe not. My advice, quite honestly, is shoot the first buck that makes you happy. This stuff's supposed to be fun. But understanding core areas and home ranges, just helps us have a little bit more fun, because the more we understand about our prey, the more effectively we can set ourselves up on it. Grown Big TV is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. Redneck Blinds, the best hunting blinds on the planet. Furminator, the best food plot implement on Earth. Hunter Safety System, saving lives is what we do. And by Antler King, bigger bucks, healthier deer. This segment of Grown Big TV is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. As I'm sure you all realize, we understand those home ranges and we can play so many more games out there in that habitat to try to get these deer to spend more time on our ground. Now that we've got them spending more time on our ground, how do we go ahead and put together the pieces to pattern these deer? Because quite honestly, what you're hearing on TV, it ain't true. What we're going to talk about next is, though, this is real world patterning whitetails coming up next. Anyone who's watched hunting shows has seen this scenario play out 100,000 times already. Now, there's the hunter up in the tree. He grabs his sponsor's grunt call and his sponsor's rattling, antlers, rattling bag, whatever. Turns the camera, we're going to try to go ahead and call and rattle up some bucks. So he goes through the whole rattling, calling sequence. And all of a sudden, he turns to the camera. Here comes one. Now, hard cut to the deer. Hard cut means that it's not a pan. It's here's the hunter, here's the deer. So here in comes the deer. It's walking just like normal. Acting like it doesn't have a care in the world. Certainly not reacting like he's coming in to investigate a fight over a hot doe. Now, hard cut to the hunter. Close up on his sponsor's arrow. Close up on his sponsor's release, close up on his sponsor's rest, come to full draw, have the logo of the bow and the shot, back to the deer. Arrow hits the deer runs away. Sometimes you see it fall, sometimes you don't. The hunter goes ahead, looks back at the camera. That's the buck we've been after. We've been patterning this deer all fall long. Hey, we got it. High fives all around, everybody's excited. Here's a dirty little secret. Well, first I can give you the dirty little secret that all those things that weren't pans, they were all shot after that deer was dead 9 times out of 10. Okay, it's cutaways that you do after the hunt. Okay, the other dirty little secret is, guess what? They almost never had that deer patterned. And they almost absolutely never have them patterned to the extent that they make it sound. As a matter of fact, when I first started consulting years and years and years ago, it was for outfitters. And a common practice was to go ahead and save the best little area. That area that 160 is coming out on a regular basis for the TV hunter. Now, there's plenty of outfitters out there that do not do this. I'm talking generalizations. But this happens a lot, people. I'm telling you. So they leave that alone because Mr. Joe Blow is coming in with Joe Blow's Hunting, to film a show. That outfitter is not being paid by Mr. Joe Blow. As a matter of fact, he's giving up a hunt, he's giving up lodging, he's giving up his guide's salary, he's giving up food, all to try to get more hunters to come to this outfitting business. So if Mr. Joe Blow does not kill Mr. Big and Studley, you know what? All that was probably a waste. Okay, so he goes ahead and he sets that area aside. In comes Joe Blow Hunter. He shows him some pictures. This is the buck that's been coming out there. He's a good one. Go in and kill him. Mr. Joe Blow goes in there, climbs up the tree. Here he comes. He shoots it, and then he spends 15 minutes telling you how he patterned this deer. Baloney. 9 times out of 10, when experts are talking about patterning deer, they are doing it to try to convince you how smart they are. None of us on free-range deer know where that deer's bedding at all times, how he's traveling to the food sources that he's using at all times, where he's always going to water, what trails he's using every single time to check for does, all that baloney. To me, the definition of patterning a deer is simply having a glimpse into his life, figuring out one or more things that he tends to do. I get a bunch of pictures of him on this food source. Therefore, he tends to feed on this food source. That is, in my book, a pattern. Now, by saying tendencies, by default, that means there will be exceptions. Mature bucks do not do the same thing every day. That is a fallacy. What we need to do is we need to figure out what they tend to do. And then we can use our greatest weapon, which is our mind, to go ahead and try to set up and kill him. Grown Big TV is brought to you by Chestnut Hill Outdoors, Reconics, see what you've been missing, and by Wildlife Research Center, the gold standard. To this point, we've covered home ranges, we've covered tendencies. We now have a better foundation of knowledge in order to go out and chase those whitetails, but also remember that the whitetails are changing throughout season. When that rut hits, everything changes within the whitetail world. There's still patterns, there's still tendencies, but they must be adapted to what the whitetails are experiencing at that time, and that is exactly what we're going to do next. If you really, really want to score big during the rut, know your doe groups. If you know your doe groups, guess what? You understand what Mr. Big is after. Mr. Big is after breeding opportunities during the rut. That is his purpose. He is a breeding machine. Okay. Unlike the young bucks, he doesn't run around the woods like an idiot. Okay, he's a seasoned veteran. He understands, he gets it. He's been through the battles. He understands what scraping's all about. He understands what rubbing's all about. He understands how to use his nose to find those does. Over and over and over growing up, I heard you can't pattern deer during the rut. Forget about growing up. Heck, I still hear it to this day. You cannot pattern bucks during the rut. Baloney. For one thing, the whole idea of patterning a buck, the way most of us experts say we do it, baloney. Now, none of us know where that buck is 24/7, 365. It's not the case. Patterns change throughout the course of the season. Each rut phase has its own purpose. It has its own drivers for the bucks. You look at early season, all it is about going ahead and trying to fatten up, lead nice, fat and sassy life up until the rut comes. Now you get into the scrape phase. At that point, it's all about advertising. It's all about advertising your presence to all the other deer in the woods. Okay, rubs, they're more of an intimidation, and frankly, giving yourself a workout, building up those neck muscles for fighting. During that peak scrape phase, that's when most of the serious fights happen. They're going ahead and they're making up their pecking order in the buck hierarchy, and then you get to the chase phase. At that point, a handful of does have already come into estrus early. Mr. Big realizes, man, we're right on the cusp, we're right there, and he turns into a kid. He can't help himself. He starts running around the woods chasing darn near every doe that's on the edge. Okay, then you get to the breeding phase. The breeding phase, it's all about breeding, and that's what we're trying to talk about today. How do you pattern that buck during the rut? Who comes into estrus first every year, especially in the Midwest and points north? Your healthiest adult does. Well, guess what? Those dominant doe groups, you just might find them there. Okay, who comes in latest? The unhealthy adult does and doe fawns. The second rut actually isn't made up of all these does that were missed the first go around. What it is it's made up of doe fawns. Doe fawns can breed their first year as soon as they meet certain physical and physiological thresholds, as soon as they grow up. Those well-timed dropped fawns in the Midwest, the overwhelming majority of those doe fawns breed. Even some of the later ones do. When you start getting up to north, up there, it's your best timed birth fawns that tend to breed. Okay. You really want to make sense out of the rut. You want to pattern Mr. Big during the rut, find what he's looking for and get to know him. The family groups are where it's at during the rut because that is where the estrus stows are. You learn their locations, where they bed, where they feed, how they travel. And in some cases, learn their dominance hierarchy simply by observing food sources while you're out there hunting. The does tell you which family group's dominant and which isn't. You do those things, you have a big head start on the rut, and all of a sudden it isn't chaos. All of a sudden, guess what? The rut makes sense. And you can bring order to that otherwise chaotic period of time. Okay, we're here today with Todd Stittelberg, the antler king himself. This man has forgot more about deer nutrition than, quite honestly, I'll ever learn. First off, we're going to dig right down into what does it take to grow the healthiest deer out there? Simply put.
You know, protein certainly is very important. Energy is very, very important. And then vitamins and minerals. Really, those are, kind of the three aspects that we're trying to cover when we're feeding deer, if you will. Protein is very, very important starting right around February 1st all the way through to basically September. Prior to and during the antler growing period, energy is very, very important starting late November and December, January.
And that's to try to build, your mature bucks have lost that 25 to 30% body weight. What you're trying to do is you're trying to slow that and reverse that cycle.
Offset it, reverse it, and let's get that weight back on that deer because Mother Nature will not allow him to start diverting nutrients towards antler growth until his body weight is basically put back on.
Sure, and he's just dumped 25 to 30% body weight during the rut, and now if you're talking about Midwest and points north, you're entering your seasonal low point for food.
Plus stress, so he really gets a curveball thrown at him because he's lost that body weight, like you said. He's in a negative energy balance, and he's probably stressed out bad from fighting and from rut, the rut. So it's probably the most challenging time for a buck is that December, January time period.
So at that point, I'm going to guess that's why you see, when those white oaks are still dropping some acorns, well, most of them are done by then, but still have some acorns on the ground, those deer are absolutely hammering them. I'm guessing that's why you see the desirability factor, the drawing factor of corn going up. Deer know what they know what they need, and they go out there and they get it.
They find it. Yeah, they do. Like a high energy block would be a good example of a product to use. But we actually have some brassica varieties that when we tested those varieties, sent them into an independent lab in February, the energy content came back nearly as high as corn. And so it's, if you've got brassica species on your property, certain ones, you can have some, it's a great source of energy. We're finding that energy is not only important in the winter, or late fall to get weight back on the bucks, but it's also very important for antler growth through the whole growing season. For years, we said it's protein. Yeah, protein is very important, but energy is probably as important.
Our home state is Wisconsin. Everybody, winter. Oh man, how bad's that winter? What about spring? What about those 2 to 3 to 4 week period between snow melt and spring green up? That actually right there, what most people don't realize, that's when most of your deer are tipping over.
That's a great point. That product, we've got a special variety of rye in there, and it's the first thing to green up in the spring, and it's extremely high in protein. It's extremely digestible, so the energy content is very high also.
So to sum up what we've covered, what we need to do is we need to understand what foods deer need when, And if we specifically target high energy foods for fall and winter, high protein foods, protein's important all the time, but make sure you can start getting that protein out there as fast as you can in the year, all the way on through to fall. And then at the same time, be able to cover that really weak point between snow melt and spring green up. Now all of a sudden we're cooking with gas.
Huge. Yep. Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you for watching Growing Big TV. If you want more information, we've got the social media covered, we've got the magazine covered, we got the TV and thing covered. We are a wealth of information, and we're here to help you become better hunters and managers. Thanks again for watching Growing Big TV. Go forth and conquer, my friends.